You come to an intersection with a stop sign. It's broad daylight. There is literally no one around. It's impossible for there to be another car around that you couldn't see. Do you stop at the stop sign? You don't have to answer that right now. We'll come back to it. Hey everybody, Matt Colville here. There's a great moment in the novel Dune, one of the greatest science fiction novels ever written from 1965. If I'm spoiling anything for you, I apologize, but the book has been out for a while. It's not my fault. You haven't gotten around to it. Where the main character, Paul Atreides, has become accepted as a member of the Fremen tribe. The Fremen are the natives of the planet Dune. They're a nomadic desert culture, and because of Paul's training as a young man, and because of the experiences he's had on Dune, Paul is the greatest fighter, the greatest swordsman, the greatest hand-to-hand combatant any of them have ever seen. Paul is in the process of leading these Fremen to rebel and revolt against the Imperium that has oppressed them for generations. The leader of the Fremen is a guy named Stilgar, and there's a moment in the book where Paul realizes that all of the Fremen are looking to him as their new leader, the man who's going to lead them in rebellion and revolt, and they're waiting for him to challenge Stilgar for leadership of the tribe. Paul was not raised as a Fremen, but he knows what's going on. In their culture, the leader of the tribe is the best fighter, the strongest warrior. And Paul is quite evidently the strongest warrior, so everyone's waiting for him to do the Fremen thing and challenge Stilgar to a trial by combat, which everyone knows Stilgar will lose, and thereby promoting Paul to become the actual leader of the Fremen. Even Stilgar realizes that this is what must be done. This is how things have always been done. The strong lead. These are a desert people. They live amongst incredible scarcity in one of the most hostile environments in the galaxy. Only the strong survive. But Paul was not only raised to be a great fighter, he was also a duke's son. So he has been raised to be a great leader and a great politician, and he deftly maneuvers events until the Fremen realize that it would be foolish for them as a tribe to let Stilgar die in trial by combat, and there's going to have to be another way because Stilgar is so useful. Trial by combat is trial to the death, and is it wise to kill Stilgar just to satisfy this age-old tradition? I can't really speak for other dungeon masters or other designers. The D&D tradition now stretches back over 40 years, but for me, that is a classic example of a chaotic society. This comes up all the time when people talk about alignment, which we love doing. I think alignment is maybe the greatest contribution to our culture that Dungeons and Dragons has given us. People who have never rolled a character before in their life have seen or made alignment charts online. There are probably people that are well familiar with that 3x3 grid on which they plot their favorite characters, which ones are lawful good, which ones are chaotic evil, and they have no idea that this comes from D&D. I love alignment. I've never had a problem with it. It's never been something I've wrestled with as either a DM or a player, but I'm also aware of its provenance. The fact that Law and Chaos, the original and for a while only two alignments, was originally invented because one of the players in one of the original D&D games stole from the other players, and everyone thought this was not the done thing. And so they invented alignment as an idea of saying there are teams. There's the good guy team and the bad guy team, and if you want to play with us, you have to be on the good guy team. In spite of the fact that I like alignment and I've never had a problem with it, it is one of the more contentious subjects surrounding D&D, and you will see folks in the comments to this video below talking about how they threw out alignment a long time ago and they never looked back and everything's fine. You are free to do so. In this day and age, there are very few mechanical hooks that rely on alignment. One of the things I do see come up often in these discussions is people talking about how could there be a chaotic society, and I think that's because they're interpreting chaotic to mean either random, which is never how I interpreted it, or I have no rules and I have no code and I'm unpredictable and you can't rely on me for anything. How could you build a society around that? This all became relevant, and the reason I'm making this video because I'm running a D&D campaign on Wednesday nights. You are free to come by Twitch and check it out, or we have a second YouTube channel, MCDM. There'll be a link in the doobly-doo to both if you want to come watch the game, The Chain of Acheron, where the players are playing mercenary characters. And not just any mercenaries. The Chain was pitched to the players as being a group of cutthroat soldiers. None of my players had any problem making characters that would be morally ambiguous and would fit within this framework until we were actually playing and they started thinking about what their alignment said. That prompted a lot of discussion, and those discussions prompted this video. For instance, my friend Tom, playing Copper, a goblin PC, was wondering what his alignment would be because goblins are chaotic, but Tom wasn't really sure what that meant. Instead of trying to explain the issue, I just asked Tom a couple of questions. There's dozens of alignment tests you can take online. You can find one to suit you, but these are the questions I came up with for Tom. And they were relevant questions because we were experiencing a very small crisis of command within the chain of Akron. We had lost two commanders in the span of like 2 months. Who would the next commander be? That's how I framed the issue for Tom. I made it about something happening in our game. I said, let's imagine that there were a new commander elected. This commander was legitimately elected based on what it says to do in the Chronicle whenever it's time to elect a new leader. But Copper thought that this person is a complete boob, useless, obviously should not be in command, and had exploited some kind of like loophole or their charisma to become the leader of the chain. Would Copper still follow that commander's orders? Completely unqualified for the job, Copper believes, but also the legitimate commander of the chain based on the laws written in the Chronicle. Tom said, I think Copper would follow the orders because he would say, this is how we do things in the chain. And I said, then Copper is lawful. And Tom went, oh, okay, this is how you have a chaotic society. It doesn't mean that they're random. It doesn't mean that they don't live by some traditions or some code. It means they don't follow the laws just for the sake of following the laws. I come to a stop sign in the middle of the road, even though I can tell no one is around. I stop. I might think this is stupid. Why am I doing this? But I still stop because I belong to a lawful society. I follow the rules even when there's no obvious reason to do so. The Fremen certainly lived by a code, which is something I think a lot of people associate with the lawful alignment, but they didn't believe in following rules just for the sake of following rules. They certainly didn't believe in following a leader just because they were elected. No. That is something a lawful society do. I followed that leader because that leader is the strongest member of the tribe, and they proved it in combat. They could kill any of us, so of course they should be the leader. The Fremen, goblins, orcs, even traditionally elves, don't believe in that kind of stuff. They believe that the best person should be the leader, the strongest. In the case of the Fremen and the orcs, the strongest member of the tribe should be the leader, and that is the right way of doing things. Not a random person, but the strongest person. We also touched on good and evil and the question of whether or not Copper would help somebody, would go out of his way to help somebody who needed help, maybe a wounded person that they saw, if not only was there no benefit to it, but there was a risk in doing so. And Tom said, I think if they were a member of the chain, then yeah, I would do it. But if not, I'm not sure Copper would. I think Copper might ignore that person and be like, listen, you're on your own. This reminds me of The Godfather, which is a classic American gangster film about the mob, a fictional mob family in which we see these deeply evil people, but the presentation of the film romanticizes their lives. It's told from their point of view, and because they live by a set of rules, but that set of rules only applies to their family, they perceive that as being virtuous. But in reality, they are deeply evil characters. In alignment terms, and maybe in moral and ethical terms, the good person is the one who risks themselves to help another, even when there is great detriment to themselves. The evil person is one who only helps those who are part of their tribe or part of their family, and everyone else has to fend for themselves. Remember the lesson of the Good Samaritan. You may have your own perfectly valid and functional interpretation of law versus chaos, but this is mine, and it's the way that I express to my players how you can have an entire culture like goblins, orcs, or elves be chaotic. So if you're sitting there as a player wondering, is my character lawful or chaotic, or you're a dungeon master trying to answer that question for a player, a useful question to ask might be, does your character stop at a stoplight even when there is literally no one around? No danger of an accident, no danger of being caught breaking the law. What do you do? For Tom, the question was a little less abstract because there was something actually happening in our game that made it relevant. Would you follow a commander that you thought gave bad orders and was incompetent if they were legally elected? And I thought it was really interesting that Tom said, yeah, I think Copper would. Copper would believe this is the civilized way of doing things. If we don't do this, then it's just going to be chaos. A classic way of expressing chaos is what happens if we stop following the rules for the sake of following the rules. I love law versus chaos as an axis, as many of you already know, because I have a lot of affection for the Michael Moorcock Eternal Champion series, where law and chaos are these universal powers at war. Now, sometimes chaos in these books is presented as randomness, but also sometimes it's presented as unconstrained growth, the chaos of nature. And law is presented, even though we might think of law as being good for civilization, in the Eternal Champion series, when the heroes go to the uttermost plane of law, it is a desolate wasteland. There is nothing growing. It is an infinite plane, flat in all directions, gray. The heroes of those books are often the characters that bring balance to the law versus chaos dichotomy, and he's presenting them both as being bad if left unrestrained. But I often represent them in my world as being the difference between civilization and wilderness, the difference between a forest left to grow unchecked and roads. That's it, folks. That's the law and chaos video. I hope you find that perspective at least interesting, if not actually useful. If you want to support the channel, we don't run ads, but we do have a store. You can pick up a copy of Strongholds and Followers. It's a 5th edition supplement that lets you attract followers, build strongholds, and get cool abilities as a result, like the ability to summon extra-dimensional creatures if you build a temple, and the ability to hack spells if you build a tower. There's like 80 pages of new monsters in there. There's a whole adventure that shows you how to use the book. We also have a Patreon. There's a link in the doobly-doo where I post my notes for each session before we play D&D on Wednesday nights. And then once the players are done with any given adventure, I wrap up all the notes and post them online for everybody. Thanks for watching, everybody. Next week, we'll betray the party. Until then, peace out.